It's a great topic too, something quite dear to my heart, the ego and its gradual departure. I'm nowhere near as far down the line as Yogesh, who invited me to do this talk this evening. He was here in Oxford at the retreat centre at the regional retreat at the weekend. And we did a panel discussion in which I was the coordinator of three speakers, one of whom was Yogesh. And he knows that I regard him as perfect. You know, he looks perfect, he behaves perfect, he has a perfect uh, hairstyle, you know, lovely, perfect parting, just like a perfect Indian yogi. And he's even more perfect than perfect now because he's got these little slightly silvery sideburns, you know, just little silver hair here that makes him look even more perfect than perfect. So I was commenting on this, and he stuck his hand in his pocket and pulled out a £10 note as if to say, thank you. This is your bribe for praising me like this. But what I really am serious about it. I mean, I've known Yogesh for many years, and even if I do something like that to praise him to the skies, his ego doesn't inflate in the slightest. That's if he has any ego left. So he's a really very good example of something moving towards zero ego. And I really always enjoy seeing him very much because of his humor and his flexibility and his kindness and thoughtfulness, all of which come with the less we're driven by a narrow, needy ego, the more we're able to live from our humanity, our goodness, our core qualities. So that was one of the first thoughts that came when he invited me to speak on zero ego. And then the next thought that came was, well, is it really possible to have zero ego? Because psychologists tell us that we must have an ego of some sort, just like a structure of selfhood. Of course, they don't necessarily know much about the deeper self, but they do know that in the same way that we have a body, we have a certain programming within our brains that we grow up, we learn things, we have a sense of being part of a community, perhaps a religious background, maybe a particular family or race. And these are definitely a part of our reality. Um, the secret, I think, along the way to becoming completely egoless, which I do think is possible, but a bit like Baba says, when if you become karmatit, you'll leave the body. And to be completely egoless, I think, is really an important part of being karmatit. And so I suspect that it would only be if we achieved such zero ego, if we really got that far, it could only be when we were actually leaving the body. However, there's a way of managing ego which egolessly. So it's a bit like the effort that Baba asks us to make, which is to become effortless. Because he said today, you've no worries. You just give everything over to me. And I was in Australia recently. I went out for the 50th anniversary of service in Australia. Beautiful event at the Sydney Opera House. Just a wonderful gift to the people in Australia with musicians and very stimulating discussion, panelists from different walks of life. Sister Genti took part, but it was just a gift to the people. It wasn't in any way glorifying the Brahma Kumaris, except by virtue of being a kind of egoless in a way. It was just offered, not looking to take anything from the public, not looking for praise, just a service and a sense of the maturity of the family there. But that also struck me as a kind of egolessness, and I think that I think that along the way we have to we have to retain some sense of identity, but not be attached to it. The ideal way of operating, which I think that the daddies were an example of, and maybe Yogesh as well, the ideal way of operating is that you know that you have this ego structure, and I would call it that. I don't think all ego is a vice. I think there is such a thing as a necessary ego and even a pure ego. But the the structure with which you live, same way you need a body to live as a human being, and it's only, when you really reach that karmatit stage, Baba says you'll leave that body. Similarly, until that time comes, I think we need some kind of ego structure. A sense that I come from a particular country, that I have a particular kind of a language, some things that I've picked up from my culture. But those things, they're not necessarily bad, but I really need to live with them and manage them in a detached way. I once saw Daddy Yankee, who was a very good example of this, retaining a personality with pure desires, but not identifying with it. She even went as far as saying at a gathering once that Daddy doesn't think of herself as a BK. So although being a BK was, of course, a part of her everyday operating, as last year she was head of the whole movement, but she didn't identify with it. So it was there as a tool for her part to be played, but she didn't identify with it. The example I'm thinking of, I think I might have mentioned this in the regional retreat, but you probably won't have heard this story before. It's a lovely daddy story. Very early on in my days as a BK, I used to have quite a lot of issues, and I would go over to see Daddy from time to time from my home in West London to where she was in Northwest London. And once I was sitting with her alone in an upstairs room at Baba Bhavan in London, and talking about something, I can't remember what, but the phone went and it was Daddy Prakashmani ringing from Madhaban. She was returning a call from Daddy Janki, who had been very upset that a sister who was very close to her and a young sister who she had high hopes for, had decided to leave. Daddy had said something, I think, may have been hurtful, and off she went, and she was back with her family. And as far as Daddy knew, she might have gone. She said she was going, and she left for a couple of weeks. She did come back, and she's still with Baba, but at that time, Daddy didn't know. And when the phone call came from Daddy Prakashmani, Daddy Janki was going like this. Well, I couldn't understand the words, but I knew the background. Like this, expressing grief and sorrow, because she was allowing those feelings, because they were there as part of the role. But as soon as the phone call had finished, and it went on for about 10 minutes with Daddy speaking like this and receiving some kind of comfort or reassurance from Daddy Ji and Madhaban. And when the phone call finished, she turned back to me and said, "Now, where were we?" As if it wasn't acting. She wasn't play acting, but she was allowing the sense of self of that part that she was playing on behalf of Baba to express some sorrow, because This sister was a very important instrument, and as I say, she's still with Baba. So that's a kind of lesson about how the ego can be present. There can even be attachment present, but if it's on behalf of Baba and you're detached from it, it's like it's really as if it's on behalf of Baba. You're with Baba, as Daddy definitely was all the time I knew her. She always had Baba with her, and so when you're coming from that kind of space, even though there may be both positive and negative feelings associated with this ego identity, like caring, for example, caring intensely, positively, and then being upset when it seemed as if something had gone wrong. Even though those feelings are there, she didn't fully identify with them. So there was the ego of the part, but the soul was already learning how to be detached from that role. And I find that really inspiring. I think that's more attractive to me in a way than the idea of being completely egoless, which Brahma Baba certainly incorporeal, viceless, and egoless. At the end, when he was leaving his body, they were his last words. But I'm not leaving the body just yet. I might do any day, but I'm certainly not incorporeal, viceless, and egoless yet. So I hope I'll stick around for a bit. And in during that sticking around, I'm making the effort to definitely making the effort to be more like Yogesh, so light and entertaining, but not to worry about the fact that there are aspects of my role where I still care about things and sometimes get frustrated, which is kind of ego. There's ego involvement in role, but it's getting less. But I think a certain amount is essential in order to continue to care about things. So Daddy, one of the things Mike George said once, which really stuck with Daddy, he said she cares, she shares, and she inspires. And so she wasn't afraid to care, not in a sloppy way or a do-gooding way, not a bit of it with Daddy. She would be fierce in her caring at times, tough love. But she really cared, and sometimes it meant that she suffered. She continued to suffer because she would really try to pull people to Baba. And if if it didn't work, and she'd invested a lot, had a lot of hopes in an individual, and then finally they went, she had she had to deal with the sense of loss that came with that caring. But she was very special among the daddies in setting this example of caring. And I feel as if Brahma Baba did the same, actually. If you think about it, quite often in the Muri, you hear him Sakamulis, not Avyekt, Baba's right beyond in the Avyekts, but in the Sakamulis, you hear Baba saying, expressing his frustration that the children aren't responding with the enthusiasm he'd like to see. They're not following the things he's telling them they should do. They're not understanding. The numbers aren't growing. But then you hear him talking to himself, well, it's okay. Everything's right in the drama. Um, Everyone's playing their part accurately. So he uses the gyan to manage his caring. But I feel that while he continued to play that role of caring and nurturing and building, I feel as if it would be fair to say that this was a kind of pure ego that was still at work. So then the question arises, if you accept this idea that some ego is necessary while we stay alive, while we continue to move towards that ultimate zero, if you accept that idea, then what kind of ego is it? The thing is that the shift has to be from an ego that is taking to an ego that is serving. In other words, an ego that is aligned with Baba and his task. I remember some of you may have come across a book called Inside Out. It was published many years ago about Daddy's teachings. And the introduction to that book is we used a talk given by a leading Sikh scholar, Alfredo Sfionunis. He spoke brilliantly he was at the Geneva Centre one year, and he spoke brilliantly about Daddy Yankee just off the cuff, but it was like an incredible, insightful profile into Daddy. And one of the things that he said was that he'd never met a person with so zero conflict of loyalties. It's a very interesting idea because it's conflict of loyalties that holds us back actually from being the best that we can be in Baba's task. You know, like if I've still got some selfish attachment arising from body consciousness, or to the extent that I still have greed or other vices that are holding me back because they're trying old ways of trying to fill um, that hollow that developed in all our hearts and minds through our long journey through time and our many births of body consciousness. It left us with a hollow, and we tried to fill that through the vices sometimes. They create a conflict of loyalties. So I've seen this myself in a long journey of letting go of attachment to Liz, my former partner. And it's been beautiful to see how as the attachment ultimately took me a long time in that case, because I used to think, just natural that I should continue to serve Liz, spend some time with her. But actually, it was attachment speaking for quite a lot of the time, where she's very detached. And it was only quite recently that I realized that there was still a selfish motive in there, and that the best way of serving anyone is special in your life is total freedom from any desire on your part, total alignment with Baba and his task, so that those good wishes are reaching them. Really pure in your relation, not looking to take anything from them. Yes, you can have the give and take of everyday relationships, but not that the soul is needing a soulmate, that kind of thing, or mourning the loss of a soulmate. So this alignment with Baba releases a lot of power and energy. A lot of the Aviat Mulis are about this, about just putting ourselves into the mindset that we have everything that we need. Baba repeatedly, almost all of the Aviat Mulis tell us this. You've got everything you need. You have all the treasures. So just take it. And but each one of us is distinct in the journey of the letting go that allows that alignment and that full inheritance to be taken inside. It's similar with the ego, that there is this pure ego that if I'm really, really keeping Baba with me and not acting out of body consciousness, like trying to prove myself to friends or seniors, not looking for position in order to convince myself that I've got a place in this world, not looking at numbers or achievements in an external sense. If I can be free of that and really just have Baba with me, then success accompanies me all the time, because although there's a kind of ego still there operating, I need that to know who I am, what I'm there to do. But as Daddy Yankee often used to say, if I answer the question, who am I, deeply, that I'm a child of God, who I belong to, is that one. And if I'm really, really deeply in that awareness, then I will know what to do. And it's it's that identity, which is I'm
Neville,
calling a pure
Neville,
ego.
excuse
That
me,
yeah.
Neville, excuse me. There is a request to speak slowly.
Sorry, always a
Okay.
danger of going too fast. Yes, thank you, Maria. Okay, so one moment. What I was saying was that if there is this alignment with Baba, if I, the soul, am truly in the awareness of being that eternal, individuated unit of consciousness, to use the language that the scientists are beginning to use, and that I've come from that one, and that one contains everything that I was originally and more. But through that relationship with that one, I'm regaining my original truth. And even while I'm in the process of regaining that, I can have that one with me so that I'm acting from a motive. It's caring, it might be sharing, it might be inspiring, it might be cleaning dishes, it might be hoovering the carpet, it might be serving people through gyan. Whatever it is, if I've got Baba with me in that way and I'm rooted in that identity, then I don't have to worry about ego. This pure ego will displace any of those other negative things, the neediness that is makes ego such a vice. A pure ego is not a vice. Pure ego is unlimited because you've got Baba with you and he's unlimited. So this is a point I would like to emphasize. When I have Baba with me, when I remember that I am Baba's, I am his child, my big purpose in life is to serve in ways that support the task that he's undertaken to transform the world. When I hold on to that consciousness, the ego identity of that pure, unlimited kind will not trouble me. It won't be a vice. I don't think this is an impossible ideal. You know, I went through a patch where I felt irritated with with Aviet Mullahs. Originally, when I came to Gyan, I couldn't understand Sakar Mullahs. I had such a stone intellect. But the Aviet Mullahs I could understand. They were quite logical. And, I thought, well, yes, they're actually quite similar to timeless spiritual teachings. Whereas Brahma Baba carrying that inheritance of his own lifetime originally as a Hindu, and then the role that he played, the childhood he'd had in India, all of that was still with him. But he had Shiv Baba as well. So that's why we could trust what he was saying and why there is so much creativity and bhavna in the Sakar Murlis. The bhavna is also present in the Avyet Murlis, but I think it was perhaps when I went through a patch where my self-respect was not so much in place because as Maria mentioned at the outset of this chat, I came out of retirement for a while, seeing the craziness of what was happening around the COVID and the lies and manipulation and dangerous dangerous behavior of the authorities. Um, and because I had a background as a medical writer and I'd seen similar things happen before, but this was the worst yet. And so I wrote scores of articles about this. And it wasn't always easy employing my old sanskars as a journalist, even though I wasn't writing for those mass media that I used to work for. And so I could be gentler. But nevertheless, the engagement with that task brought back something of the limited ego again. And I think it was because of that that the Abiyak Mulis started to sound to me a little bit idealistic. And they offer such a total thing. So often in Abiyak Mulis, 2 or 3 lines are so wonderful. You think, if I could do that, I've done everything, I'll be there. And it's true. They are quite brilliant in that regard. But, if there's a sense of moving towards that, not like it's an impossible ideal, like it seemed to me when I started, not an ideal that I was relating to at all. But now that I've been 40 years down the journey, I can relate to that ideal, and the feeling that I was slipping in regard to that, slipping back into old ego sanskars associated with the journalism, made me a bit frustrated for a while. And then when I came through that period and found myself learning from it, because it's good to do these things where we engage with the old world and our old sanskars in order to see what's still there. This is valuable. And so I learned from it. And as I learned, then my stage improved. That selfish ego, because it's what it is, when you're trying to prove something. There was good intention as well. I republished a book which nobody has been particularly interested in it, but I just felt it had to be done. So that was a good thing. It was done from a good motive. But there was also this negativity coming in. And so learning from that to align myself more with Baba, more with, excuse me, this phone keeps pinging. Must have to, there we are. Aligning myself more with Baba and bringing Baba with me as I'm in action, which is easier when I'm back now in the community in Oxford as well, because at the time I was living alone for a while and then in a different setting. But it's easier back here in the community at GRC. And I'm finding that I'm very inspired by the Abiyak Molis and that ultimate that they offer to us. But I've also learned to be more accepting of myself. One of the big words that came to me when I was returning here, and it was a difference with how we'd been in the earlier days here, at least from my side, which sometimes really quite tough, a lot of ego crunching going on. And now acceptance is a word very powerfully in my mind. Accept myself. These things are there, but my journey is going to free me from them in time. These things are there in others, but each one is bringing so much to Baba. Even those who are not interested in this at present, mostly they are doing their best, playing their parts accurately in the world. So this acceptance has grown inside me, and that too helps this pure ego to be operating. It's when you're wanting things to be other than they are that you get frustrated and the ego causes problems. But a pure ego allows you to continue to play your part in this world, but without the negative consequences of a selfish, greedy, lustful ego. Last word on this. I had a nice realization the other day. I was writing an article to the theme. Yes, it was an article about self-sabotage and how sometimes you might be moving along and then, you think your stage is getting better, but then something pulls from the old world and you pull yourself away from that aviate stage, that subtlety of understanding, and become more engaged in the gross. Not everybody suffers this, but I have done from time to time. And I was thinking about it. Why do I do that sometimes? And I realized that there has been a sense of when Baba says we have to die alive, I didn't want to die in ways that would take me away from family and friends and grandchildren and all of that. They're all in my life still. And there have been times where it was difficult to maintain the relationships because of my different lifestyle and aims. But as time's gone on and I've become more pure, as I was indicating in my motives of connection with others, instead of attachment, more like relationship, as that has happened, I've been finding that it's not so much that you have to lose a love for life, but you have to lose a lust for life. Lust for life means you're hungry for experience. Love for life means that you're taking everything you need from Baba and you're then sharing from that. And that's like the pure ego, in my view. So, in a sense, it's a zero because you're with the zero. If I've got the zero with me, then I can be at one with myself and with truth. And then ultimately, okay, there is that final zero ego when we leave the body, but hopefully that's not going to be quite just yet because I've got more to do. So those were some thoughts I wanted to put on the table. I'm very happy to hear any comments or questions.
Thank you, Neville. Whenever you share from your heart, and you explain to us about your efforts, and I admire you because of that. Uh, you always talk about your efforts. There are not many, actually, there is only one question. You were saying that you must connect with a giving ego, not a taking ego. Can you explain more about that?
Yes. Uh, I'm very aware of the taking ego. Something to do with my upbringing, maybe I must be my karma as well over the many births of body consciousness. I came into this world with I think a certain insecurity that was meant that I was unsure of my place in this world. And in my teenage years, I was very lost. I remember not finding any value in the sort of study that we had to do at school. I just did a token amount to get by. But then when I found a career and married someone I loved and had children, there was a neediness that I was bringing to those roles, trying to prove myself. wanting to be a very good husband, wanting to lead a life with my partner that defined us as successful, wanting to earn well, wanting of the children. In the first half of their childhood, I remember being quite an adventurous father, doing a lot with them, taking them on expeditions and adventures. And that was okay, but there was an element in it that was for myself, not, it was for this needing ego, this wanting ego, not for them. And in the second half of their childhood, when I was taking from Baba, things changed dramatically. And I was so much more with them, but with them in a way that was not asking of them, more accepting them as unique individuals in their own right, instead of seeing them perhaps as extensions of myself, which is what the needing ego tends to do. Hope that was okay for the translators, that instead of seeing them as extensions of myself, which is what the needy ego wants to do, instead of that, because I was receiving intensely at that time from Baba, like the empty pot was filling dramatically, they were beneficiaries of that in the sense that even though one of our boys later wrote a very funny book called The House is Full of Yogis about my, my obsession or my love for the yogi family and the changes that happened. But actually, I think that they were a great benefit to the boys, and they've both gone on to, they're both in their 50s now, so it's a long time back, but they've both gone on to handle their relationships nicely, and their work relationships have been constructive. And whereas for myself, I feel that there was this hungry ego that wanted to prove myself all the time. And then, with the intensity of love that I felt pouring into me from the drishti, from the seniors, that in itself did a lot of healing. And then gradually, as the understanding fell into place, so that I was able to talk to myself and understand myself truly as being an eternal soul who's come from that one, whose inheritance can be received from that one as I continue to remember him. As that has gone on, this this hungry ego has become more a sense of self that is more full and more generous. So I'm calling it an ego in a kind of psychological term, but it's not ego as a vice. It's much more ego as a virtue. Um, Ego itself is a kind of neutral word, but a pure ego definitely is one that is, as I indicated, it's aligned with goodness, it's aligned with kindness, it's aligned with generosity, it's non-violent, it's not needy. And Raj Yoga is all about achieving that kind of condition. I remember once Abhiyat Baba said this was in Madhavan. It was a beautiful statement in front of 20,000 people. He said, remembrance means kindness. You could take that as a definition, or you could say that when there is remembrance, there is kindness. But for me, it's almost like a definition. Remembrance, when I have Baba with me, means that I will be giving in my relationships in the world. I'll have love for life. I won't be lusting after life. It's this key shift. It's what it's all about, actually. It's a very good question because it's absolutely what this journey is all about. That shift from needing and taking to having and giving. And it's still in process, but come a long way. So I feel very appreciative now. I'm still very aware that Yogesh is further down the line, way further down the line. He is such a role model for me with his lightness and humor. But nevertheless, I also feel that my own part has had its own value, coming from that quite extreme neediness and gradually seeing that disappear until I can be more at peace with myself and the world.
Thank you. You share from your heart, and really, we appreciate it very much. There is another question. Can you explain a bit more about acceptance? How
Mm.
do you use it for yourself and with others? What do you say to yourself or do practically? Can you give some examples?
I'll try. Yes, again, a good question. I think perhaps because of having had that quite extreme case of a needy ego, there've been sanskars of that neediness and the insecurity linked to it. And when those sanskars crop up, they're like ghosts of self-doubt. That's an expression that Tamsin Ramsey used when she was visiting us recently to talk about her new book on custodians of purity, which is a beautiful academic work, but with a lot of heart. So she spoke of these ghosts of self-doubt. And it's their sanskars. And one of the things that I've learned in my journey is that I mustn't push these things down. I mustn't say to my, oh, I'm a BK, I mustn't have any self-doubt, or I'm a BK, I mustn't have any lustful feelings, or, you know, anger, that's awful. That distorts, that's an assault on the soul when I use pressure like that against myself, and it will not resolve these things. This is why Baba is so wonderful, and his senior teachers are so wonderful in just focusing on the positive that's in us, not on the negative. And I've gradually learned to do that for myself. So I'm aware of this needing ego, and yet, I was reflecting recently that when I came to Baba, even though I had a lot of this ego that had driven me to lead a yuppie lifestyle, grand house, double income family, both big jobs. We were really had come a long way from our own quite impoverished backgrounds. So there was a lot of this drive to prove myself, but it was coming from the need to fill an inner emptiness. But I was making the mistake of trying to fill it from outside, not knowing about the inner being and how to address the inner being. So when I came to Baba, the senior sisters would have known that I had that ego. I'm quite sure of it. Must have been in almost everything I said and did. But they never, ever told me, Neville, you're full of ego. Never. They looked past the negative, the needy Neville ego. They looked through to the potential of the child of God and would constantly bring me back to that. They might tell me off about certain actions. I often got the bony finger from Daddy Yankee, but there was never an accusation of of that vice of ego. And somehow, even though self-doubt and self-criticism have been a long time passing, but now I'm better able to employ that same tactic, that same yukti that the seniors did with me when I was full of ego. So when something hurts and I see, oh, it's because the, the ego was still there in some way, then it's like I'm not pushing it away. I'm just knowing that that is just something that will pass if I keep focusing on what is not ego, not focusing on the ego because that energy could help it to grow. Understanding it, definitely. Getting the signals from it, definitely. But using those signals to focus on Baba and me as the child of Baba. I'm better at that than I used to. And it's this self-acceptance that actually comes before you're able to be more accepting with others. If you haven't got that self-acceptance in place, it's very difficult not to find yourself projecting your own self-dissatisfaction onto the world around you. So, you feel critical of maybe other people, you're very aware of their weaknesses, you might gossip about them, you might be drawn to all the gossip that goes on in the media about people's weaknesses and failings. And that just furthers the problem because by projecting it outwards, looking at it outside of you, it's a means of avoiding facing what you've suppressed in yourself. So self-acceptance is just vital. And that comes from, as I say, using gyan. It's like the number two thing that Baba offers us, apart from you're a soul and my child, the number two essence of gyan is you've had all these many births going through the cycle. It's just a wonderful gift to us. We need to use that understanding when a ghost of some old sanskar, some old negativity comes up in us. Might be jealousy, might be needy ego, it might be lustful thing. All of those are representations of the neediness that the soul felt because of what it had lost. So that's okay. It's okay as long as I now restore what was lost in the soul in the way that Baba tells me, which is seeing the beauty of the inner being and of the future self in Satyug, seeing that, being alive to it, feeling it, having that bhavna for the self is just so incredibly important because then it displaces the the need for those old sanskars to pop up. Those ghosts are really kept away. This is like Maya, really, but I like this expression, ghosts of self-doubt. I feel as if I was haunted by them for a long time. And now I think they're on the run. Of course, sometimes I feel inadequate still. But if that feeling does come, I'm just aware it's a sanskar. I was helped in this recently when Bishmoonbai was over with us, actually. Must have been a year or two back because he's had this ill health for a while, which I feel sure he's going to pull through from. But he was over here, and I mentioned to him at one point that sometimes I still feel alone. Not lonely, but just sometimes feel alone. And he didn't go into it, he just said, oh, it's a sanskar, brother. That's great, you know. You acknowledge, and then you know it's a sanskar, you know the context in which those sanskaras of neediness have arisen, your long journey through time, the emptiness that developed because of body consciousness, and you know the solution. I am original, pure, beautiful, actually ex-deity soul, you know. Even now, I am an ex-deity, and the deity role lies there ahead. So when I'm rooting myself in that awareness and that acceptance of what Baba's telling me about, you know how difficult it is sometimes to accept the truth of your elevated self because of these habits of putting yourself down. And I think it may also come from this nervousness about accepting how great we are, may also come from the pain of loss, the pain of brought by ego, insecure, false identities of the past, and when they led us up the garden path, misled us, and then the hurt that came. So we feel, no, I have to put myself down. But no, that's the opposite of what we have to do on this journey, not the miserable sinner approach. The the understanding that, yeah, I am as Baba sees me, and as he constantly tells me, he's aware of my weaknesses, but he constantly tells me, you are my loving child, and just accept all the treasures and you'll be fine. Everything starts with self-acceptance. Then it's becomes so much easier to respect the others around you and accept that, yes, this person has this sanskar, may still be troublesome at times. That's okay, because look at the quality in them. The more we do that, the easier our relationships become. But it does require first real dedication to self-acceptance.
Wonderful. Um, There is a second part of this question, but probably you have answered it. How do you deal with your own mistakes? Um, how do you deal with that inferiority ego when you mess up with something?
Mm. Yeah, I think it is covered, but
Yeah,
just
it
to
is.
reinforce that, to say that firstly, it's really good to be facing that you have made a mistake. Like I like playing with that word. A, we use in English sometimes the word take, like a take on the world, like how you see something. A mistake is you haven't seen it correctly. So seeing it that way, it's free of the sense of, oh, you're a sinner and that sort of stuff. You've made a mistake on the world, and that's okay. That was part of your journey. Learn from it. So, firstly, the acceptance of the mistake. Secondly, not beating yourself up about it, but knowing, seeing it in the context of the cycle, spinning the cycle of self-realization, knowing that we're in deep Kali Yuga and still some of those things have to come in order to be finished. And then thirdly, the positive self, not glorification, but self-talk, positive self-talk in line with what Baba tells me, keeping Baba with me, keeping him at my side so that even where I'm facing circumstances which I can't really manage with my own sanskars, but if I've got him with me because of his purity and wisdom, I'll come through okay. So invoking your higher self, invoking Baba, and above all, not not being disheartened by mistakes. Baba warned us about that recently. Don't become disheartened. Don't become tired. That's a shame when that happens. It's unnecessary. In itself, it's a mistake to feel disheartened.
Yes, great. I've never thought about mistake,
Mhm.
the word in English. We only have 2 minutes. You're one of the very special and fortunate souls who were you were with Daddy Yankee for so long. And once Daddy Yankee, when I asked her how can you deal with low kicks many years ago, and she told me you have to make the low kick a low kick. How do you deal with your grandchildren, your children?
Yes,
Do you make them a low kick? Do you feel them
no,
like
no, no. I'll tell you a story that I found very valuable. I know there's not much time left, but um, so my grandchildren now, they're mostly in their 20s. There's one who's 19 or 20, the youngest. But when they started arriving, and I was in Cairn, um, I didn't realize it, but it was a bit of a crisis for me because traditionally we've had a body conscious view of grandchildren as your line to the future. You know, that's how people have lived. Oh, it's the future. And something of that sanskar was unconsciously working. And I told Genti about this sort of bit of doubt that had come in my life. And she said, you know, Nev, I think it might be the grandchildren. I asked Baba and I found that it was. And the next day in the Murli, Baba said, love your grandchildren, but remember that those bodies are going to burn. It's so graphic that it has not returned to the Murli in the years since. I think it must have been taken out because the Murlis have become so public that people might misinterpret it. But what Baba was meaning was you be you be aware of them as souls. You're playing a role with them. Those bodies are going to finish sometime, but love them and love them spiritually, not love them with a body conscious spirit, but love them with your own soul spirit, that that deep humanity that re-emerges as we move along this path. So even at that time when I was still struggling with all sorts of stuff of ego and other things on the journey, but even then it made a big difference to me. And I've had that relationship with them since then. I have made them with the grandchildren of my sons. It's somehow been quite easy. I love them, and when I'm with them, I'm happy to be me. I don't think I've got to do this, that, or the other with them. I'm just happy to be with them. With my ex, Liz, it was a different story. There, I felt a sense of loss when the marriage finished after the children had grown up. And even though we remained close over the years, when I would see her again, for quite a long time, there was a pull where I would feel that I was wanting to be with her, come down to her level, be Lockett with her in order to make her happy. That's a mistake. You love, yes. Give company, yes. Be present with them, with those people that you're close to, but don't bring yourself out of the avyect consciousness, out of the subtle consciousness that I'm I'm not needing anything here because I'm not regarding these relationships as I used to in a body conscious way. I'm with other children of God. My role is to be with them. They don't understand necessarily what I'm doing at the moment or the deeper dimension of things, but it's my privilege to be with them. So it's a subtle thing that you shift from wanting anything from them attachment means you're wanting something, even, and that can sometimes pretend, masquerade, hide itself, wear the mask of being some, I'm trying to serve them. That's really not the right attitude. The right attitude is you're with Baba and you're just yourself in that pure sense, not wanting anything from them. And in that way, they'll be happy to be with you and they won't feel that they're being manipulated. They won't feel that you're still needy in any way. And they'll actually develop a respect for your path. Whereas if you compromise yourself too much in being with them, then it can it can cause a lack of respect in the relationship. That's been my experience, and quite a subtle one.